Kubala. Patty?
Thank you. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge and cheer their hearts with thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you once again for joining us. And now I would like to introduce Tom Kubala, who's going to share a little bit of information about the Baha'i faith, what we believe, and then he will introduce our speaker. So Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Nancy. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see your smiling faces. I usually read these two paragraphs just to give those maybe who aren't familiar with the Baha'i faith a little bit of a nutshell description of what Baha'is believe. Throughout history, God has sent to humanity a series of divine educators known as manifestations of God, whose teachings have provided the basis for the advancement of civilization. These manifestations have included Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. Baha'u'llah, the latest of these messengers, explained that the religions of the world come from the same source and are in essence successive chapters of one religion from God. Baha'is believe the crucial need facing humanity is to find a unifying vision of the future of society and of the nature and purpose of life. Such a vision unfolds in the writings of Baha'u'llah. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our dear friend, Dan Conlon, who describes himself as a soul, a son, a brother, a friend, a worker, a husband, an entrepreneur, a father, and a grandfather. And we couldn't really introduce Dan without introducing as well his dear wife, Michelle. She won't be part of the presentation, but the two of them form such a strong bond of unity that it is hard not to introduce her as well. So with that, Dan, it's all yours.
So kind.
It's all yours, Dan.
Thank you very much. I know that you and Nancy were breaking up a little bit, so I hope that that you can hear me just as clearly as is necessary. So again, thank you, Tom and Patty, for hosting this. I'm so appreciative of the time and effort and energy you put into putting on this series of enlightening conversations. Tonight's topic is one of my favorites, becoming your true self. I've spent my entire life, I think, in exploration of what is the meaning of that. Who are we really, and how are we all really connected? And so tonight's topic is written about extensively in the writings of the Baha'i faith. And today we're only going to touch on a few of those points. And you should know that there are specific books and articles that are written on this topic. And all you need to do is ask, and they would be readily supplied to you for further and independent research and investigation. Baha'is believe that humanity develops in stages. Like individual humans, humanity moves through infancy, childhood, adolescence, into adulthood, and hopefully maturity. Humanity is moving through an organic process of maturation. This maturation process has spiritual components as well, and they contribute to an ever-advancing civilization. And so that's a fundamental idea that drives this context of who we are in becoming our true selves. Much of the chaos we see happening in society today is attributed to this sense that humanity is still in its adolescence. So we look around the world, we see the way people behave. We're all confounded by what people do to each other. And when you think about humanity being in adolescence, it sheds a little bit of understanding on this idea. So the spiritual component of maturation is the discussion that we're going to have tonight. And this is a very personal process, a conscious process of becoming. For me, it starts with trying to understand who we are and what our true self is. So Tom, if you move to the next slide. Maybe you already have. There are three things I've identified that I'm going to talk about tonight. One is the two natures of man, human and spiritual. The second is the Baha'i perspective on what it means to become our true self. And then third, kind of let's talk a little bit about the process of becoming your true self. I'm going to start with a little story that, you know, somebody sent to me a long time ago, and I've hung on to it. And let me just kind of start with this to kind of set the tone for what we're going to be considering this evening. Story of Sashi. Soon after her brother was born, little Sashi began to ask her parents to leave her alone with the new baby. They worried that, like most 4-year-olds, she might feel jealous and want to hit or shake him, so they said no. But she showed no signs of jealousy. She treated the baby with kindness, and her pleas to be left alone with him became more urgent. They decided to allow it. Elated, she went into the baby's room and shut the door, but it opened a crack, enough for the curious parents to peek in and listen. They saw little Sashi walk quietly up to her baby brother, put her face very close to his, and asked quietly, "Baby, tell me what God feels like. I'm beginning to forget." And so here's a 4-year-old child that's beginning to forget what God feels like. And, you know, this happens sometimes. We forget what it means to be connected or close to our Creator. So Tom, let's move to the next slide, please. I'm going to read some quotes from the Baha'i teachings, Baha'i writings as we move through. This first one really speaks to the animating influence of faith. It reads like this: "O ye children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God in his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race, to foster a spirit of love and fellowship amongst men." And so that's the purpose for the sense of community, coming together with intention and purpose to promote the interests of humanity. And so the next slide, Tom. Abdu'l-Baha was in Paris in 1911, and he gave several talks during his stay there. One of them was on the two natures of man. And I've taken some excerpts from this that we'll read over the next two slides. And these are just excerpts. If you'd like the entire talk, please let us know. It's easily emailed to you for your own study of the entire thing. But in this talk that Abdu'l-Baha gave in Paris in 1911, he said, "In man, there are two natures, his spiritual or higher nature and his material or lower nature. In one, he approaches God, in the other, he lives for the world alone." So let's see here. So signs are both of these natures are to be found in men. In his material aspects, he expresses untruth, cruelty, injustice. All of these are outcomes of his lower nature. The attributes of the divine nature are shown forth in love and mercy, kindness, truth, justice, one and all being expressions of this higher nature. Every good habit, every noble quality belongs to man's spiritual nature, whereas all his imperfections and sinful actions are born of his material nature. If a man's divine nature dominates his human nature, we have a saint. Man has the power to do both good and to do evil. If his power for good predominate and his inclinations for doing wrong are conquered, then man is in truth may be called a saint. But if, on the contrary, he rejects the things of God and allows his evil passions to conquer him, then he is no better than a mere animal. The next slide. Saints are men who have freed themselves from the world of matter and who have overcome sin. They live in the world but are not of it, their thoughts being continually in the world of the spirit. Their lives are spent in holiness, and their deeds show forth love, justice, and godliness. They are illumined from on high. They have the bright and shining lamp in the darkness of earth. These are the saints of God. Pray to God that he may strengthen you in divine virtue, so that you may be as angels in the world, beacons of light to disclose the mysteries of the kingdom to those of understanding hearts. So it's a very potent talk, and I can only imagine being there in Paris with Abdu'l-Baha as he spoke to this group and addressed this very important understanding that we have these two natures, and much of what we understand about ourselves and others can be found in an appreciation of these two natures, this material and this spiritual component that makes up each and every one of us. God sends his prophets into the world to teach and enlighten men, to explain to him the mysteries of the power of the Holy Spirit, to enable him to reflect the light, and so in his turn to be a source of guidance to others. Heavenly books, the Bible, the Quran, and the other holy writings have been given by God as guides into the path of divine virtue, love, justice, peace. Therefore, I say unto you that you should strive to follow the counsel of these blessed books, and so order your lives that ye may, following the examples set forth before you, become yourself the saints of the Most High. So that's this, first step in our conversation, these two natures of man. And each religion has holy book or books. We study these holy scriptures to better understand our purpose and to influence the development of our character, our spiritual selves, etc. Baha'is call these writings the creative word. They are infused with the knowledge, the wisdom, and the insight to guide humanity into a deeper understanding of their true selves, our true selves. Imagine, if you will, that these creative words that we're going to read in these next couple of slides were like a conversation God is having with each and every one of us to help us understand our true nature. The first one that Tom has on the screen is, O my servants, could ye apprehend with what wonders of my munificence and bounty I have willed to entrust your souls? Ye would of a truth rid yourself of attachment to all created things, and would gain a true knowledge of your own selves, a knowledge which is the same as the comprehension of mine own being. You would find yourselves independent of all else but me, and would perceive with your inner and outer eye, as manifest as the revelation of my effulgent name, the seas of my loving kindness and bounty moving within you. Wow. That's God talking to us, saying, this is the way we were created. Now, I wasn't familiar with the word munificence. That's not a common part of my language. And so I looked it up, and the definition is the quality or action of being lavishly generous, great generosity. That is what Baha'u'llah says God has made each and every one of us. Effulgence, shining brightly, radiant. And so let me just continue with a couple of these other gems from the Baha'i writings. In the next slide, you'll see, with the hands of power I made thee, and with the fingers of strength I created thee. And within thee, I have placed the essence of my life, Baha'u'llah. And he goes on, he says, O son of man, veiled in my immemorial being, and in the ancient eternity of my essence, I knew my love for thee. Therefore, I created thee, have ingrained on thee my image and revealed to thee my beauty. And then finally, I created thee rich. Why dost thou bring thyself down to poverty? Noble I made thee. Wherewith dost thou abase thyself? Out of the essence of knowledge I gave thee being. Why seekest thou enlightenment from anyone beside me? Out of the clay of love I molded thee. How dost thou busy thyself with another? Turn thyself, thy sight unto thyself, that thou mayest find me standing within thee, mighty, powerful, and self-subsisting. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read writing this creative word, and it gives me a glimpse. And honestly, feel a little gap between me and what these writings suggest we are. There's a little bit of a gap there. But these words tell us that, how we were created. I knew my love for thee, therefore I created thee, engraved on thee my image, and revealed unto thee my beauty. Well, this is that inner reality, that spiritual nature of man, the essence of who we are. Somewhere in our inner essence is an image of our true selves, which I believe is what Baha'u'llah was speaking to us in a few of these quotes that we've had a chance to share again this evening. So this is the basis for this idea of how we're created. This is the basis for why Baha'is believe in the oneness of humanity. It's not the science of genetics. It's this sense that this inner sense of who we are is all the same. We share this, this common essence of how we were created. That is the basis by which Baha'is believe in the oneness of humanity. And so we're going to have an opportunity to discuss some of these things a little bit later. So, please make note of any of the ideas that come to mind as we conclude this portion of our conversation tonight. If there's anything that brings to mind, please make a note of that so we can take some time to discuss the Baha'i perspective on becoming your true self. Tom, if we can go to the next slide, please. In the sidebar of this one, it says, every human being possesses an immortal soul. It possesses an immortal, rational soul that passes through this world for a brief time and continues for eternity to advance towards God. Our life's purpose is to progress spiritually and to be of service to humanity. By living a life of service to humanity, we acquire the divine qualities which we need in the life to come as we continue for eternity to advance towards God. And so these two natures here, the material reality and the spiritual reality, are unique to all of us. I mean, we share this common origin in all religions speak to this idea of being created in the image and likeness of God. And so, but from the moment we're born into this world, there's a focus on the material. We have this animal material nature and the spiritual nature. And so, from the very beginning, particularly in Western, the Western part of the world, this material identity starts to develop from our earliest days. Our personal narrative, our story about where we grew up and our education, all the things that happened to us throughout our lifetime, help develop and shape this sense of identity. And so we sometimes are shaping, we're building this identity out of the things of the material, or the things that the material world recognizes as having value. And it can get to a point where we're so involved in that ego and that identity, that sense of who we are in the world, the way we want to be seen and the way other people see us, that we can entirely forget, like Sashi, what it feels like to be close to God. And it's not that Baha'is believe that we should disown the material world. Quite contrary, we should participate in a very coherent way. But whether we have a career or profession that's our identity, our education, our social status, whatever makes up that way that we introduce ourselves to the world. And in fact, when Tom asked me for this bio, I thought, well, I could talk about my credentials, but that's really that sense of the material world, the way the world might know me. But in truth, I began as a soul and I will continue as a soul after this life is over. And that is in truth the essence of what we're talking about. So sometimes we feel this gap between our, kind of a disconnect, maybe even a struggle between the spiritual and the material. And there's a teaching in the Baha'i faith that is so important to this idea of becoming your true self, that work done in the spirit of service is elevated to worship. That when we do whatever we do, and we do it with that infusion of a spirit of humility and service, that it changes the things that we do in a way that influences and impacts others. And it's bringing that spiritual component to everything that we do, to being mindful and conscious of that. But look, we live in the material world. None of us are perfect. This isn't about, some esoteric sense. It's about trying to live very practically in the material world. And so we can get caught up in the pace of life. It can be quite overwhelming. I think sometimes, we're encouraged in the material world to build this identity, a construction that we make out of the material world, that it becomes something around us and not something that's in us. And so that's something for our consideration. The second component on this screen is the spiritual nature, this sense of feeling close to God, on a regular and consistent basis. And so we can begin to discover this inner sense by reading some of the quotes like the ones that I read from the Baha'i writings, but they can be found in all the world's religions. But through prayer and meditation and immersing ourselves in the ocean of this creative word, and then engaging in acts of service to humanity, that combination begins to help us understand who we really truly are. And so prayer, meditation, and the study of the sacred writings help us get acquainted with this sense of what our true self is. And so to have the courage and the faith that's required to do this, what I would call spiritual work, is so important to most of us of faith, to be engaged in this coherent way of living where we participate in the material world, in it fully, but we do it in a way that brings forth this spiritual capacity that's latent and potentially there in all of us, and well developed in many, quite frankly. So the purpose of life in the material world is to perfect the soul. The soul is what was before we were in this earthly existence and will continue after. And so this is the time where we get to be challenged and tested, and our beliefs, our actions, all, if we reflect on them in light of this true self, then we learn things from those tests and difficulties in a way that create this coherence balance between found in the spiritual world. We have enough to do living our best life, working on our own spiritual maturity. And so, Tom, let's advance to the next slide, if you would. Thank you. So this quote is from Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith. And he said something very important, I think, to all of us. He says, each of us is responsible for one life only, and that is our own. Each of us is immeasurably far from being perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. And the task of perfecting our own life and character is one that requires all our attention, all our willpower and energy. If we allow our attention and energy to be taken up in the efforts to keep others right and remedy their faults, we are wasting our precious time. Amen, right? And then there was a Baha'i scholar, Dr. Arbab, who said, maturity implies that one is aware of the traps of self-centeredness. One cannot develop human virtues in isolation. Too great a focus on oneself, on one's potential, on one's talents, distorts the very laudable goal of personal growth. The arena in which such growth occurs is service to humanity. The idolization of self-improvement, self-expression, and self-satisfaction can easily create sentiments of either guilt or self-righteousness. Therefore, your sense of purpose is directed towards personal growth and at the same time towards service to the cause of unity and to humanity. I thought that is a good counterpart, because I believe in the material world today, there's a lot of emphasis on personal growth, and it is so influenced by the material aspects of what humanity is. It's like life is tough. I kid with people all the time. We make mistakes. We do things that might bring us regret, and so I joke with people, say, yeah, life is tough. It's so tough that nobody gets out alive. So I know you're laughing at that. I appreciate it when you laugh at my jokes. It's a good thing. One other idea is that each one of us has the potential to reflect the attributes of God. That is just a fact from a Baha'i perspective. This is the meaning of men being created in the image of God. For in him are potentially revealed all the attributes and names of God to a degree that no other created being hath excelled or surpassed. Virtues like love and mercy and kindness, truth and justice, forgiveness, compassion. We are all able to reflect divine virtues to the extent that we cleanse the mirror of our heart and minds, and through prayer and study and application of the sacred scriptures, the acquisition of knowledge, efforts to improve our conduct, and to overcome tests and difficulties in service to humanity. Look, I've had a good pleasure meeting a lot of people throughout my life, and everybody I've met and talked with and have developed a relationship with, I realized, we all share in common the lack of perfection in this world. And, most of us have been banged up and bruised, and sometimes the pressure of life, gives us cracks, who we are. We have chips. I mean, there are all kinds of things that happen. And Tom, if you go to the next slide, please. There is this Japanese art form called Kinzukura. And it's an amazing idea. It says here to repair with gold, the art of repairing pottery with gold and silver lacquer, understanding that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. And when I first saw these pieces of art, I couldn't help but feel this connection to the idea of becoming one's true self, and that we go through life and sometimes we're so concerned for the things that happen to us over the course of our life, the challenges, of all kinds. I mean, what they are for you. And then I look at this piece of art, and I realize that there's a wisdom in the tests and the changes that come our way, because they give us an opportunity to understand our true nature, that spiritual nature. The material world is way too short. And our existence to advance towards God is continuous and eternal. And so while we're in this physical world, maybe instead of trying to hide these flaws and imperfections, that maybe there's a spiritual process that we apply, a spiritual technique of repair that actually makes us all more beautiful. Imagine that. So, Tom, let's advance to the next slide, if you would. So the creative word, the power of reading and studying the writings, cannot be overstated. The basic source of power for transformation is the writings of Baha'u'llah. Exposure to his writings nurtures the development of faith, the first prerequisite of transformation. Basically, faith refers to an attitude towards the unknown or the unknowable, which ultimately enables one to approach it in a way that something more of it can become known. So think about that for a moment. It's like faith gives us that ability to act when we have uncertainty. But somehow having the ability, the willingness to act, or to look, or to pray deeply, or to meditate, or to consider these ideas that we're sharing, it requires courage and faith to do that spiritual work. This unknown in ourselves that Baha'u'llah was talking about earlier, these attributes, the way that we were created in the eyes of God, God is an unknowable essence, yet we're created in that image. So something in ourselves is also unknown, and it requires that faith and courage to kind of do that spiritual work to understand, to know that is also unknown. And so this spiritual work, this clearing away of the material construction, the identity to find within what has always been there. I mean, it's a sense that it's not about acquiring these spiritual things. This is the way we were created according to the Baha'i perspective on this topic. It's there. It's like we just simply need to, kind of like get out of the way of it and allow it to happen, because it's naturally there, to have it, released, if you will. And so the essence of faith means loving the unknown or unknowable, an attraction to whatever is unknown, and a capacity to approach it. Since, as Baha'u'llah affirms, God is unknowable, it takes faith to become attracted and related to him. To discover this unknown in ourselves is the essence of becoming one's true self, in my experience. So I think we're on if we go to we're on that next slide. Thank you. Baha'u'llah has written that man should know his own self and recognize that which leadeth unto loftiness or lowliness, glory or abasement, wealth or poverty. And elsewhere, that if we ponder each created thing, we shall witness a myriad perfect wisdoms and learn a myriad new and wondrous truths. And again, so the power of the creative word. This is the final quote in my presentation. And Baha'u'llah says, every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God is endowed with such a potency as can instill new life into every human frame, if ye be of them that comprehend this truth. All the wondrous works ye behold in the world have been manifested through the operation of his supreme and most exalted will, his wondrous and inflexible purpose. Through the mere revelation of the word fashioner, issuing forth from his lips and proclaiming his attributes to mankind, such power is released as can generate through successive ages all the manifold arts which the hand of man can produce. This verily is a certain truth. No sooner is this resplendent word uttered than an animating energy stirring within all created things, give birth to the means and instruments whereby such arts can be produced and perfected. All the wondrous achievements ye now witness are the direct consequences of the revelation of his name. In this day, in the days to come, ye will verily behold things which ye have never heard before. And so for humanity to advance to our real spiritual destiny, we as individuals have to play our part to contributing to what the world can become. And by understanding this unknown, becoming aware of, discovering or releasing this unknown or unfamiliar nature that we have, the spiritual nature, is the spiritual work that we're all involved in. So, as a metaphor, I was thinking, I've thought about this, over the years, about who we are and how this true self emerges through the release of the things that hold back or interfere with the expression of this inner real nature. And so, Tom, if you go to the next slide for me, please. This next slide is an image of a quarry. Okay, there we go. And you can see this quarry where marble is being mined. And so you can see the different colors and shapes and hues. And Tom, if you go to the next slide, please. We sometimes, we as humans, having this human material experience, we feel like, just a block of marble. And so here's one, Tom, we'll go to the next one. We're all familiar with the concept of seeing a big old block of marble like this. And in light of our conversation, the quotes that we've read from the Baha'i writings tonight about that inner nature of who we are as human beings, perhaps this metaphor, the series of images will help us understand how this, I think there are two things that happen in our spiritual development. One is that we acquire knowledge and understanding, and the other is that we chip away or we erode those things of the material world to reveal our spiritual nature. And Tom, if you kind of go through a couple of these next slides. So here we have some images of taking that block of marble. And so these are the early stages of moving from, in fact, this is kind of where all of us are at. It's like we're partially in the spiritual development phase, but there's still much of the world that surrounds us and holds on to us and holds us back in whatever way that might mean for each of us. Next slide, Tom. And so as we see the sculptor working with the marble, I think we can also easily relate to the idea that we're do this spiritual work to reveal this inner beauty that's already there. It's not, we just take the things away that interfere with these images coming into the world to be manifest in the world. The next slide, please, Tom. And so you can see in these images, and Tom, just at your own pace, we'll just kind of go through these final images. They're beautiful, and hopefully you can find a piece of sculpture that you relate to, and have that be part of your metaphor of how you approach this sense of developing, our inner selves. And I'd like to close with a prayer that is, prayer that many Baha'is have come to memorize. And we'll close with this and then open for some such discussion. Oh God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. O God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. O God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Well, thank you all.
Thought-provoking
Thank you all so much for
conversation
your
or
attention.
presentation. We're going to open the floor to your questions or your comments now, and we ask that you do remain muted unless you're called upon, and you can signal that you have something to say or something to ask, either by simply raising your hand in front of your camera or by using the electronic hand raising device that's part of chat or part of Zoom rather. And Tom will call on you in as best he can. He'll try and keep things in order. So.
Any thoughts or questions for the speaker? Okay.
So I heard that question and I'll answer it.
Oh,
Sometimes I think of these, all throughout the writings of most religions, there are these attributes or virtues: love, compassion, generosity, kindness, forgiveness. And I think part of the spiritual work we do to become our true selves is to understand the reciprocity, to love, but also to allow ourselves to be loved. That there are these two sides to these equations that, Khalil Gibran in one of his writings talked about joy and sorrow. And he said that sorrow is the tool that digs the well that we fill with our joy. And I think the ability to love comes easily, but sometimes the ability to accept to accept someone else's love can be challenging. But when we resist letting someone else's love come to us, we limit their ability to practice loving. And sometimes it's easy to forgive when people do wrong, but to forgive ourselves is an entirely different matter. To be generous with other people, but to allow generosity to come to us. This give and take, this ability to build capacities on both sides of any one of these spiritual attributes is to fully know it and to fully understand it. And we can take a lifetime to understand those sort of things.
thank you. I think Dr. Kiai had a question.
Hello, Tom.
Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this program. It's the first time. I believe it's the first time I meet you, Tom, through Zoom. I have met Patty, Nancy, and of course, dear Dan. I have always thought I know everything until I begin to listen to others. And I realize how little I know. So it was very enjoyable listening to Dan describing how to be your true self. And through knowing how little I know, I hope at my age I can still grow. And when I see the beautiful picture on your left-hand side on the wall of your father, I really enjoyed meeting him. If I'm not making a mistake, one time at Mr. and Mrs. Green's house in Belgium. And I really enjoyed him. And I am richer for it. So I just wanted to thank you for having me on this venue, and it was nice, very, very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bali.
Yes, Colleen. And you're muted. There we go.
Hello, friends. I know about 10 of you, of the ones that are on screen, so some of you are dear friends of mine. I'm personally going through a lot of relationships because of where we are all in life, where the sands of the hourglass are most on the bottom than on the top, so many of our friends are there as well. And in this age of, and where we are, many of my friends are dealing with very bad health or cancer or are at their end of days. And I came to this specifically, Dan, because when they're talking to you, and all of us have friends, I know all of us have friends that are dealing with ill health or have friends that are coming and revealing their soul about maybe how they are worried toward their end of days. And your talk, Dan, has given me some ideas about how to talk to some of them. It seems as though probably 8 of my dearest companions have gone through so much. And by using some of the quotes that I screenshot today, I think it's going to help me talk to them, because sometimes your dearest friends are ones that will reveal what's going on. And I wanted to thank you for picking the quotes that you did. And I will be using them because sometimes we don't see what others see in us. And, you know, I specifically am going to use a couple of these in talking to my friends as they are coming to their end of days. So thank you.
Renee, you have your hand up.
Thank you.
Hello
Colleen.
there. I want to say thank you for the invitation tonight. I've been listening and creating art as we're talking. And it's given me a little insight and a little peace tonight, because I'm struggling right now with the after cancer effects, if you would. Because nothing's the same after surgery, treatment, and all that. And trying to kind of reground myself and try to find myself again since last year.
Mm.
So thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're most welcome. Yeah, when I saw that that Japanese art form, where it, you know, the fact that things had been broken and then healed or mended, that's art imitating life, right? I mean, that, you know, if we have, and I think what's required in that art form is it requires a consciousness to see things that are imperfect and recognize their perfection. And so we as individuals, we can spend over much time thinking about our imperfections, and we all have them, and it's worth knowing what they are. but as that closing prayer talked about, to not dwell on the unpleasant things of life is a spiritual challenge. It's like we have to recognize them. Living in denial is not the goal, but to not dwell on them and to see the things that happen to us as a blessing. Tests are a healing medicine, as Baha'u'llah says, and that requires a consciousness, because it's very easy to get caught up in all the other things that are possibilities for us to consider, like why me, and what, do I deserve this bad thing? That all of that stuff is part of the material world, and it does not affect the soul, the essence of who we are. The essence of who we are is not material. It's a soul that pre-existed. It spends some time here in this earthly existence perfecting the soul. And then the soul continues unaffected by the material world to make progress and to advance towards God for eternity. And so I love that art form. It just spoke to me immediately. In some way, I understand that all of my imperfections and flaws, even if I try to hide them from other people, they're still going to see them anyways, and it's the way we are. And to embrace it, to accept it with a spiritual consciousness that makes it okay to have imperfection. It's just a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Nancy.
Yes, Dan, I was really happy to have the quotes concerning the creator and the fashioner, and particularly really in light of what Dr. Kiai was saying about, hoping that as we age, we can still keep learning. It's been one of those things that I think I've come to understand from the Baha'i faith, that, it was one of those sort of aha moments somewhere along the way, that if we were created in the image of God, then that meant if God is the creator, that we must also then be creative. And so when I'm struggling with a problem or trying to solve something or get past something, if I can just remember that I am creative enough to be able to solve problems, by tapping into that very idea that you shared, the idea of the fashioner giving us what we need to fashion our solutions and to fashion our lives and to fashion our growth. And so anyway, I wanted to say thank you for including some of those quotes, because that's been really important to me to hang on to. And I love the inclusion of the art pieces, and particularly the Japanese pieces, because it's such a visual way to hang on to that idea. And I'm really a visual person. So, so thanks for all of that.
You're welcome. When I was reading Paris Talks and that the Abdul Baha's talk about the two natures of man, I don't know whether anybody noticed that, but he talked about saints. And the first time I read it, it's like, oh man, saints. I mean, that's like, what a far off consideration, that is. And yet, about the third or fourth reading, I started to allow myself to think that, okay, well, saints are just humans too. That they're all, we're all the, you can think of your favorite saint that you might have, whether it's Saint Francis or whomever you might hold up as a saintly human being. And they were born just the same way. They went, some people call Mother Teresa a saint. She found whatever enlightenment she had very late in life. And I didn't mean to direct that at you, Dr. Vali, but very late in life, she transformed into, a very saintly person. And I just, as I read through that over and over again, it just, it's like I can accept that human beings are saintly by nature, by the creation, by being created in the image and likeness of God. And that we have to work awfully hard to keep that from happening, rather than we work really hard to get there. Not that that should be anybody's goal. I just, just, you know.
Patty has a question.
No, not a question, of course. I just have to say how much seeing the carved marble statues, not like we're stone, but the idea that, this hard block of stone can be made into something so beautiful that seems like it has life and it lasts a very long time. It's just another metaphor that really made me think about, it's hard work and it hurts to grow and develop these spiritual qualities. And there's no guarantee that your trajectory is straight. It's usually a very bumpy road and takes a long time. So thank you for including those, because I really feel like art, as like Renee was even doing art while she's listening, I think it's real integral to growth and appreciation for life.
Dick, did you have your hand up? Or Colette? Yes.
Thank you, Dan. And again, I appreciate the inclusion of art forms as metaphor, because that's where I live. And I wanted to share a little something that I picked up from a class that I took from a Japanese woman. She was teaching Japanese brush painting, something I learned I will never be very good at. It's the sort of thing it takes a lifetime to master. But I gleaned a few things that were on the order of the kintsugi idea. And she encouraged us to accept what we put on the paper. So for instance, she encouraged us to stand well, to breathe well, to prepare ourselves, to loosen our arms, to practice the motion that we were going to make with the brush, and then take your breath, have an intent, and make that brush stroke on the paper. And a very Western scholarly sort of approach would be to then critique that mark and immediately judge it or criticize it. Say, oh my gosh, it's too fat, or it's too low on the paper, or why did I do that, or geez, now what do I do? She encouraged us to look at what you had done and accept it. Because whether you liked it or not wasn't the point. The point was, that's the mark you made, so that must be who you are right now. Accept it, and then make another one. Keep going. See what you can do with it. See how you could improve it. See how you could incorporate the mistake you made, into something better, perhaps. And so I don't always succeed in keeping that mindset. But what strikes me as helpful about it in the context of what you're saying tonight is that we don't beat ourselves up for our imperfection. We see it, we acknowledge it. Now what are you going to do about it? You go forward, you try again, you make another mark on the paper. So I just wanted to share that, that bit of wisdom that I was able to pick up, and see if that's useful to anybody else.
Sweet. So sweet.
Yeah, it was sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Colette. Yeah. Well, it's like Shoghi Effendi said, we don't have time to look at other people's flaws either. We all have them, and sure, we could notate them and point them out and try to correct them, but we're better off just focusing on what we need to do, and this sense of perfection. Someone had told me years ago that perfectionism and trying to do things perfect was a form of self-abuse, and and so I took that to heart, that if we over obsess on those sorts of concepts of perfection, which is non-existent in the material world for us humans, it's a way of taking, not offering ourselves self-respect and learning from our mistakes, and that in fact the mistakes are absolutely critical to the education, the learning, and the process of becoming requires that we make mistakes, and we own them, and we learn from them, and we move on. So that is an essential part, in my view, of becoming one's true self. The more we do, the more mistakes we make. The more mistakes we make, the more progress we make as well.
Mhm. I think Lauren had a question, and then we may have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Lauren, go ahead.
You have to unmute though, Lauren. Still can't hear you.
No.
Well,
You
Lauren,
might want him to press *6.
Yeah, I did.
there we go. Nope, Lauren's still muted, so. Well, Tom and Patty, thank you again for hosting this continued series. They've all been, and maybe with the exception of this one, they've all been really great. And I really have appreciated participating. So,
Tom, do you have another slide or two to put up?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We do hope you found some food for thought. I know I did tonight. Our next talk will be on Friday night, June 11th, when, lo and behold, Tom Kubala is going to give the talk on when architecture reflects oneness.
mhm.
And we will be fleshing out our schedule for June 25th in time to tell you about it on June 11th. Oh, we've got it.
Well,
Don Quintana.
this is a possibility, which would be
Oh,
really
okay.
exciting. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, if you are interested in learning more about the Baha'i faith or its study groups or devotional gatherings, just finding out more in general about the faith, you can contact Patty Kubala at the phone number shown there, or email the Cedarburg Baha'i community at the email address shown there, or you can go online to www.baha'i.org to get more general information. And of course, you can always ask a Baha'i, because we do love to talk, and we typically are always digging in some way. And if we don't know an answer, we know where to go to find an answer. So we would love to have you seek us out and join us again on June 11th. Thank you again very much for being with us and for your participation. Happy to have you here. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. It was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see
Thank
everybody.
you. Hey, Dan.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Good job.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.